never find your treasure, and you will never truly die. You will wander this island as a ghost, knowing no joy, no love.
Directed by Matt Peters, we are talking Blood Red Beach, and this is a pirate-themed slasher B-movie horror. Now, the story focuses on a group of friends who go to their eccentric, wealthy mate, and he is hosting this kind of party on this island, basically, where he has arranged a pirate-themed adventure weekend where a group of his friends are going to be looking for pirate treasure. Everyone's kind of dressed up in fancy dress, and this group of friends sort of turn up there, and they all just think it's fun and games. They get paired off, and so we have two pairs and one group of three, and they're each given one gold piece that has apparently come from real pirate treasure, with the idea being if they could find the rest, they get to keep the loot. Unbeknownst to them, this island has actually got pirate treasure, and it is the pirate treasure of this cursed pirate who has been doomed to live eternally in a kind of summy undead state, and he now wants his 7 pieces of gold back from his missing treasure. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. Now, I'm not going to lie. This one is a cheesy, schlocky film. If you're not into schlock, then I don't expect you would like this one, because it's definitely up there with the schlockiest of the schlocky. That being said, if you are a fan of the schlock, what can you expect? That is fun. Here's the thing I enjoyed the most about this movie, is the actual characters. Our protagonists are actually all fun characters. I complain a lot about unnecessary drama and kind of arguments that you have when you have a group of friends that kind of go off somewhere to do something, and the filmmakers feel they need to inflate the drama by having someone's having an affair or things like this, or there's just kind of like some reason why these people argue and bicker. But that's not really the case here. We do have a group of very different friends, but they all actually kind of get on and are actually sort of, you can kind of see why they're friends, even though there are some different personality types. And our cast of characters are actually kind of quite memorable as well. They kind of have their sort of little personality quirks. Even our host, he's kind of like this hyperactive, eccentric guy, but he's still a fun character. So I have to say, the characters, even though we're not talking like really in-depth backstories or anything like that, but they're all sort of fun characters who you kind of want to root for. I mean, you don't really want to see any of them sort of bite the bullet. Even the ones which I would suppose are the kind of like the would be the douchey couple, which are the kind of like the A-types. They're not like bad people necessarily. They're just a little bit more sort of like the wanting to be alpha types, if that makes sense. But they're not. They still get on with everyone. They don't cause drama and stuff. So I really kind of quite like this kind of group of friends that, I mean, that they're, as I say, it's a schlocky B movie, but they're kind of all likeable. They all seem like they would be friends. They're all quite sort of individual in their own sort of way, and they have some quite charming character traits. Now, the acting isn't brilliant. It's not really a movie that's aspiring to be a dramatic masterpiece, and, you know, although I think some of the acting does stand out as not being particularly strong, shall we say, I think it's sort of appropriate for this kind of style of movie where you still sort of buy into the characters enough where you can kind of have that sort of, you know, suspension of disbelief and kind of get on with it. Another decision here was to have no true protagonist, no one protagonist. And that sometimes doesn't work because you don't have someone to root for. But because this group of people, I think, is, for the most part, very likeable, there's not one kind of central protagonist, which means you don't quite know who's going to end up living and who's going to end up getting killed. And you're sort of rooting for everyone. You're rooting for this kind of whole group, which, you know, you don't quite know who's going to end up as our kind of final people, I suppose. And who does end up is not necessarily who you may think. So again, I think that works to the movie's sort of favour. Now, this movie is low budget. It is kind of cheap. I did quite like our pirate bad guy as well. You know, he's kind of constantly like singing these kind of sea shanties and things like this, and I kind of quite liked his kind of skull mask and his, you know, they've not done a huge amount to make him like look undead or anything, but he's still sort of quite fun. And the fun thing here is that obviously our cast of protagonists don't really understand that there's something actually serious going on. They think this is just, you know, actors being put on by our, you know, eccentric wealthy friend who has kind of laid all this on. So they're kind of, you know, interacting with this kind of undead pirate, not realising the kind of the danger they're in, which again adds to kind of like to more sort of fun. There's not a whole lot of VFX in this movie, to be honest. We do see a little bit of practical kind of gore, and when we do see it, you know, I appreciate the fact that it's done practically, and there's one or two sort of fun sort of gore shots here and there. There's not a lot, but when it's done, I think, you know, the movie does the best job it can with the clearly limited sort of budget that it sort of has, you know, and I kind of quite appreciate it, particularly kind of our end gore shot, which I won't sort of spoil for you. That was kind of quite fun. The movie has a somewhat sort of hyper-realised sense of cinematography, a use of kind of like filters and stuff, and this kind of blood red moon and all that. And although it's not looking particularly kind of realistic, it kind of looks like fun in a kind of disco sort of way, you know, with the kind of the dry ice and everything like that. You know, and, you know, if you like a pirate-themed slasher movie that's fairly uncomplicated and has a kind of fun, sort of goofy edge to it, then you may want to check it out. What doesn't work with this movie, it is very low budget, and it does kind of show through. As I've kind of alluded to, I think the acting sort of works for this kind of schlocky movie that it's clearly trying to be, but people who want a more dramatic movie, a more serious take, might find the acting choices, I say, a little bit more on the kind of, you know, the B-movie standard, shall we say. I think the lack of real sort of visuals in regards to special effects, sort of supernatural things going on, might be a little disappointing for some, because ultimately what it comes down to is a guy dressed up as a pirate walking around this island. And, you know, I think even though they've obviously got a lower budget in regards to having overt and elaborate special effects, more could have been done to make this guy look like he's 300 years old. I think the problem here may be that this pirate looks like his clothes are more or less brand new. And, you know, he could have been having a lot more like distressed looking sort of clothes and like this, like they've been there for 300 years. The sort of the goofy sort of jokey tone of this movie might not be for everyone. The movie is certainly trying to be comedic without necessarily being an out and out sort of comedy. And again, that sort of tone, you might kind of, it does diffuse some of the tension and some of the more dramatic elements that you might otherwise have in this sort of movie. And it is a very, very sort of simple plot at the end of the day. It's nothing sort of too complicated. There's a couple of scenes that, again, that are just silly, like we have our pirate find his treasure chest, you know, and he just by looking at it, he knows that there's 7 gold pieces that are missing. You know, it's a little silly. We have this kind of witch character. How does she get involved? There's talk of like bloodlines, and she was involved with the original ancestor was involved with the original curse, but it doesn't really explain how she knows all about it and stuff. So again, you know, don't look too hard at the kind of the plot holes here, is all I'll say. I think it's a fun movie if you don't mind a low budget kind of slasher. It's not as extravagant as the Graveyard Shark movie, which I think was the other movie that these guys I've seen have been responsible for. But it's an okay sort of watch if you like a kind of pirate themed slasher and you don't mind the low budget flick. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Kind of an average movie in some degrees, nothing too special necessarily, but it's worth a watch if that sort of sounds like something you might be interested in. 5 out of 10. Please let me know your thoughts if you've seen it, and I look forward to seeing you next time.